you know, like everything else, especially maybe in the spiritual traditions, um, we think complicated is better. That you know, we we love the sound of things that um, seem far out and strange, and um, that because it holds a promise of something mysterious. But this sense of returning home I mean, it is a mystery, but it's not mysterious because it really is home, and it's so available that when you, it's almost like you're falling back into it. And
Absolutely.
when you're there, um, you just know. Um, and of
I'm
course, if you're bumped out of it, not that you're ever really out of it, um, then those questions come up. How do I get it back? Um, for me, there was a heavy, almost a depression because I started a lot of this because I didn't like myself.
mm,
And when you have that moment of welcoming silence and everything is still and everything is accepting, um, and you feel at home, and then that air character comes rushing back, it was almost like you again. I'd had
mhm.
enough of you. I was hoping that you were gone. So it took me a little bit to uh, make peace with the return of that um, character, and now um, that's part of my forgiveness practice. Actually, is forgiving the judgment of myself of
Mm.
that personality ever needed to go anywhere.
That's right. Yeah. We're not asked to do anything again, but to accept the changelessness, the eternal, and abide as that. So I too have had a lot of I've had abandonment stories. I lost my dad to suicide when I was 15, and so that blended itself into, my adulthood and abandonment and self-hatred and just all the things. But those can all be brought in as awareness, showing it as awareness. And yeah, to resist, I think, just perpetuates the personal self identification, as I'm sure that you've experienced yourself. But the more I resisted my personality traits and the this and the that, the more I hated myself.
Right.
Yeah. So
Um,
yeah, it goes back to again non-judgment and bringing that to the Holy Spirit.
what so was it that that personal sense of um, not being worthy of the blame and the judgment that brought you originally to the course?
Yeah. So by the time I got to the course, it was 2009 around there, and at that point, my dad died when I was 15, so I think that was like 19 years later, and I was still carrying that pain, the blame, the shame, the stories, and I got to a point where I was ready. I actually had so here's actually I don't think I've actually ever formally shared this, so I'm kind of excited. Um, in 2010, I was in a a dark space in the sense of I had not healed. I went to therapy and I did all the things, traditionally that I could around my dad's suicide. But I just got to a place where I wanted just to release. And long story short, something triggered me, which then triggered my my ego even more, which then triggered my abandonment issues. And what I always did was I always grabbed my dad's journals. He had left me 5 journals when he had died. And so anytime I felt like I wanted to be close to him, I would take his journals and I would read them. And so I was on the patio and I was crying and sobbing, angry at God. I was brought up Catholic, so I had a lot of like the anger and just all of the things. And I just kept saying, why? I want to release this. Help me, God, help me, God. And in that frantic moment, a still, small, very clear, very direct voice said, "You are not lacking your father's journal. You are not lacking your father's suicide note. You are lacking a shift in perception to see your dad's journal." And it was much more clear than that. I'm kind of getting the two stories mixed up, but in that moment, I just had a recognition of seeing things through a different lens, and that was through love rather than fear, because my whole teenage years, 20s, 30s, were all based on this lack. I was missing something. And for me, it was a suicide note. Um, Here's the words that came up. It was you're not lacking a suicide note. You're failing to see the gift in your dad's 5 journals. And then from there, I had this awakening of I don't know I can't even put it into words, but it was a peace and love that it was tied to heaven. That's all I can say. It was just, not heaven as an outside place, but
Right.
it was a really big shift in perception. And from that moment on, I mean, the next day I walked out of my garage and I was putting the kids in the car, and I saw the birds, and everything sounded louder, everything was more clear. And then that really led me into spiritual seeking, like, what is happening? What is going on? And I joined unity churches and all different things. And then I was led to A Course in Miracles. But it was from the suffering, ultimately. All that to say, it was the suffering that led me to A Course in Miracles.
Um, and you literally had the experience of a miracle. That the definition by A Course in Miracles is a shift in perception. Um,
Like that.
and when you read that, did you think that's what happened?
Absolutely. I did. And it was very clear to me as to why I was being drawn to A Course in Miracles. The further I read it, the further I began to really understand. um, I could see that, yeah, there was a lot of things where "Oh, that's what that was," or um, "This is what I'm experiencing right now." Yeah, even though it was very abstract or
Right.
felt it.
Um, and of course, there was the suffering. You mentioned your father's suicide, uh, but everything that led up to that suicide had to have a great, great impact on you.
It did. Um, it did in the sense of in the earthly realm. I mean, I think even going back to the child, I think I've always been one to ask really big questions. I remember lying in my bed as a young little girl saying, "Who am I? What is this?" Knowing that there's something bigger. Um, but I would say what led to that was love. Honestly, I look back at the pain of my dad's death, and it all comes back to love. I loved deeply, of course, my own father on this earthly plane. Um, but then I say that, and I can also recognize that that love for my dad is pales in comparison of how we understand love as it pertains to A Course in Miracles.
Right.
Um, so yeah, the things leading up to my father's death, um, my life was actually pretty easy up until that point. I thought I had life all figured out at the age of 15. It's laughable.
Um, it is, but no less laughable than me thinking I had things figured out when I was 35.
Right.
Um, and uh, David Fishman,
Yep.
uh, he recommended his own practice, and he said, "Give it a try. Um, work with lesson 25 in your daily life. I don't know what anything is for."
Oh, yeah.
And boy, when I was 30, when I was 15, when I was 30, heck, even when I was 50, uh, I knew what everything. I was assured that I knew what everything was for. Um, and I would not only did I know, I would tell you that you don't know what it's for. Um, but I can fix it. I can help you. Um, and so yeah, that self surety of a teenager uh,
Yeah.
carries over for quite some time.
Yeah, absolutely. But honestly, I'm so grateful for the suffering that I experienced, not just with my dad's suicide, but there was many other crises after that. As a Course in Miracles student, and I almost lost my son. He was in the ICU. He was on a whole breathing tube, and again, bringing in that don't know mind is, I think, what you're speaking to. That don't know mind. I don't know what anything is for. I don't know what I am. Um, I think just allows that I am presence to pervade the whole experience. So yeah, I'm grateful I suffered as much as I did because now I don't suffer.
Right.
I mean, within reason, sometimes the character wants to tell stories, but then it just dissolves into the nothingness that it is because it's nothing.
And I think some people when they hear us say, or they hear someone say, I don't suffer anymore, or my suffering is reduced, they think that things don't happen.
Mm,
But as you mentioned with your son, things happen. Life continues. Things that even judgment continues, and we might say this is bad. Um, but a large degree of that psychological suffering that used to be attached to things um, just isn't there.
absolutely. And I completely agree with you in the sense of there's this misbelief that if you work A Course in Miracles just right, everything will be harmonious. And I fell victim to that. And in truth, that um, I was gifted quite the opportunity to let all of that come crashing down actually in 2022. And I'm sharing this because my son has said he's given me permission over the years to share this, but my oldest son had a suicide attempt, and needless to say, it rocked me to my very core, even as a Course in Miracles student, largely and tied to my dad, and all of that was coming up for healing. And then a year later, I almost lost my oldest son. And looking back, as a practicing A Course in Miracles student, I didn't shove those human emotions down, the mother in me who wanted to protect her children. Um, Instead, I was in the cinema with Jesus, watching this with neutrality and fully surrendering to the point where I remember driving to the hospital with my older son to go see him in the ICU, and I said, "Okay, if he's going to transition, he's going to transition." And there was a deep, and that wasn't me, Jody, the character, because the mother is wanting to protect, but I just felt this deep seeking and resisting nothing and allowing everything, surrendering everything. And the more exceptions I made, the more pain I was in. And so I've adopted this practice of not making exceptions and recognizing that when I am upset, no matter how small, I don't make exceptions. I recognize making exceptions. And who is the I that's making exceptions? It's
Right.
not it's not the I am, it's the small I.
Jody, that story to me felt like almost like you experienced a sigh, like you just ev- everything being let go. So when you said surrendered, that's the image that came to mind, was just this big sigh of um, I truly um, accept things as they are. Um, and you know, we should probably mention that when you said neutrality, um, that the neutrality that's experienced is really love.
Hmm, that's it. Love in its purest form.
Um,
Yeah.
we did have someone ask a question earlier in the live stream about what is love, and I think you described it so beautifully there. Um, that and that the neutrality of love in its purest form, as you said, is what allows us to hold someone when they're suffering so much. including ourselves.
Yep. Absolutely. That is love. Love is what we are. And we hear that, and that sounds grand and that sounds wonderful. But if we really knew that love is what we are, we wouldn't get as tripped up or more identified as the small self. If we truly knew that love is what we are on a deep, deep, deep fundamental level, there's nothing that can touch it, because love in its purest form is eternal. It's changeless. It's formless.
And of course, this is what you've been pointing to this entire conversation. This is what A Course in Miracles points to.
Yeah. It's simple. Our minds just make it so complex, and it makes it so, the practices, and I've had that experience over the years of, am I doing the practices? Okay, I'm not judging. Okay, I'm not doing this. And I think a little bit of the conceptual mind is needed at first, but then, just for an understanding. And so it's integrated. Um, but then everything for me just continues to point back, beyond all the practices that A Course in Miracles offers and the lessons and everything. It's just this. It's just this. And we can sense it. If you're not driving, you can place your hands on your heart, or just, you can have your eyes opened or closed. It doesn't matter. I am is here. And so it's about sensing it. Thoughts can spin, they can swirl around. But what you are, what I am, what we all are, is just this pure, effortless awareness that is the I am. And that's it.
Thank you for
That's
that,
it.
Julie.
Yeah.
Um, I'm actually a uh, Vedic mantra meditation teacher,
Okay,
and
nice.
what you said was so vital to the real practice of meditation, that thoughts come and thoughts go. They're not, when we meditate, they're not our concern.
That's right. Yeah, they're not. And when we're upset, it's because we're identified with the thought. So thoughts aren't anything. Thoughts are just happening, and we know that because we don't know the next thought. We have no idea what the next thought is going to be. We we pretend like we know what's going to arise in our thought awareness, but really we don't. And so they're just happening. And when we become upset, when we become, you know, in fear and overwhelmed and just upset, it's because we've entangled ourselves with those thoughts. We've identified fully with those thoughts as the thoughts. So we can just look at the thoughts for the nothingness that they are, because they're nothing. They're all part of the mirage. And if we were going for a walk together and we saw a huge anaconda, but we knew it was a mirage, we wouldn't be scared. We would
Right?
we would laugh because it wouldn't be anything. And so I think it's just about not demonizing our thoughts, but instead seeing them for the nothingness that they are, because they, in sense, veil. And of course, they can never veil in truth, but they seem to veil our true nature because we're so identified with the thoughts. But thoughts are just happening. They're just happening, and we can allow them to happen.
And they also cause our interpretation of events and people. And every interpretation is speaking of veiled, is a veiled judgment.
Yep. A split. It's just a split mind.
Right?
That's all it is.
While we're on this subject, do you mind answering the question?
Yeah, let's do it.
Um, when illness or loss arises, where exactly does the suffering lie? In the event, the interpretation, or the identification?
The identification. Um, Yeah, because things can happen, thoughts can happen, upsets can happen, war can happen, catastrophic illnesses, events in the world can happen, but it's the identification with them that causes our suffering.
Um,
So yeah, so it's just about seeing the identification, and I think that's the dissolution also, is just seeing it without the judgment, but just watching what happens, watching the judgments, watching the thoughts, watching the stories of the mind, coming out of the story and into the holy instant.
and as you mentioned, with all of this being simple, that really, what you just said really was um, simple because so many people want to get rid of their thoughts. That,
Hmm.
I have people coming to me to learn meditation. They say, I don't know if you can help me. I've tried before and I just can't stop my thinking. And it's such an immense relief when you tell them you're not supposed to. Um, your brain is a thought producing machine, and it is it's going to do what the brain does.
Yeah. And
Fortunately,
staying the seer of the experience, staying the seer of the character's experience, that helps to disentangle ourselves from identification with the thoughts.
right?
Yeah, rather than fighting, because that resistance, that push-pull is just gonna, as we all know, perpetuate the problem. When we try to stop thoughts, it just perpetuates it. So instead, kind of having this observer mind, the seeing mind, watching the character and all of its thoughts and all of its stories just happen. They're just happening, and it's okay.
Um, one of the teaching methods that I was taught was in mantra meditation. There's four things that can happen. You can be thinking the mantra, perfect, and it really is just another thought that you're very gently adding in. You could be having regular thoughts, which is fine because again, that's what the brain does. You can fall asleep, which is fine. Means you're relaxed. Means that the meditation has been relaxing and you're getting some benefits from it. Or you can slip into the gap, which is the ever-present space between all the thoughts.
Mhm.
And as we go from mantra to thought, from mantra to thought, from thought back to mantra, uh, we, without even any effort, we fall into that gap. And we never know when we're there or how long we're going to stay there because the gap itself is without experience. It's without measurement, it's without judgment. So you simply are there, and then a thought comes and you go, oh, a thought. And then you're back in the thinking realm. And
Yep.
it's all okay. There's no judgment to the meditation at all.
Yes, exactly, and I think that allows the one who's meditating just to relax, because that fighting is what causes the angst of I'm not doing it right. I'm trying to get somewhere. That also the thoughts of I'm not doing it. That's who is the one who's trying to get somewhere. It's the unawakened one, but we're already awake. We're already here. The I am is here. We already are that which we are seeking.